poor widow gave all her life savings to a poor boy. Years later he saved her life. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. On a blistering hot afternoon, Matthew walked home, his heart sinking with every step. In his pocket was the money his father had entrusted him to pay for school fees. He had kept it close, careful not to let it out of his sight. But somewhere along the way, it had slipped from his grasp. Desperation clung to him as he searched frantically through his pockets, his fingers trembling with fear. His heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea how it had disappeared. As he walked, the sun burned against his skin, but it was nothing compared to the agony he felt inside. The tears started to fall without warning, hot and unchecked, streaming down his dusty face. He wasn't just crying out of sadness, he was crying out of fear. The crushing fear of what awaited him at home if he didn't return with the receipt. People passed by, their eyes flicking over him, but none of them stopped. They saw his pain but didn't care enough to help. And as the world moved on around him, Matthew stood there, lost in his sorrow, wondering how he could possibly face his father and stepmother. His tears blurred everything, the road ahead, the people around him, and the cruel weight of the situation that threatened to break him. As Matthew stood there, drowning in his tears and hopelessness, a soft voice broke through his despair. "My child, why are you crying like this?" A woman's kind eyes met his, her voice gentle but filled with concern. Matthew wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, sniffling as he looked up at the stranger. She was sitting in a humble stall by the roadside, selling tomatoes and peppers. Her face was weathered by time, but there was something warm and genuine in her expression that immediately caught Matthew's attention. His voice cracked as he tried to explain. "I lost my school fees. I've looked everywhere but I can't find it. My stepmother she'll be so angry. I don't know what to do." The woman didn't hesitate. She rose from her seat and stepped closer to him, her eyes softening with compassion. "Calm down, my son," she said, her tone soothing as she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Tell me everything that happened." As Matthew spoke, telling her about his father's job loss, his stepmother's harshness, and the money he had been given for his school fees, the woman listened intently, her heart breaking for the boy in front of her. She knew what it was like to struggle, to have little, and yet, without a second thought, she reached into the small tin box under her stall where she kept her earnings. It was all she had left for the day. But she didn't care. "How much do you need?" she asked quietly, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision. 5,000 naira, Matthew replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman, her hands trembling slightly, pulled out a small bundle of notes. "Here," she said, placing the money gently into his hands. "Take it, go pay your school fees. It's my last, but it's okay. You need it more than I do." Matthew's eyes widened in disbelief, his tears mixing with his gratitude. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Yes, my child," she smiled weakly, though her heart was heavy. "Be serious in school. Don't follow bad friends. One day, you will be great. I know it." With a shaky breath, Matthew took the money, clutched it tightly to his chest, and wiped his tears. "Thank you, Mama. I promise. I'll make you proud. When I become rich, I'll never forget you. I'll find you and help you." The woman smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. "Make sure you don't forget my name." "Okay," she said softly, her hand resting gently on his head. "I won't," Matthew whispered, his voice thick with emotion. With a final nod, he turned and hurried off toward the school, his heart full of hope for the first time that day. As he ran, he looked back just once, and whispered to the wind, "God bless that woman." When Matthew walked through the door, his heart was still heavy. But there was a sense of relief that came with having the school fees and the receipt in his pocket. His father was sitting on a small wooden bench, his face etched with the usual lines of worry, his shoulders slumped under the weight of life's struggles. As Matthew entered, his father looked up, his eyes searching Matthew's face for answers. "Did you pay the school fees?" he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Matthew nodded slowly, his heart racing. "Yes, Daddy," he said, though his voice faltered. "I did." His father's expression shifted instantly from concern to a brief flicker of relief. He stood up, his posture loosening, as if a burden had been lifted. "Good, that's one less problem to worry about," he muttered, his voice rough with emotion. He reached for the receipt. Matthew handed it over, his fingers trembling. But then, a wave of guilt washed over him, and his stomach twisted. "Daddy, I have to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His father's brows furrowed in confusion. "What is it?" Matthew swallowed hard, his throat dry. He knew the words would hurt, but they had to be said. "I lost the money on my way to school today." His father's face drained of color. The calm he had just regained vanished in an instant, replaced by shock and disbelief. "What?" he shouted, his voice rising. "You did what?" His eyes were wide with anger and fear, his face contorting in disbelief. "How could you be so careless? Do you have any idea what that money meant to this house? Your stepmother, she'll starve us again. She'll say I'm useless, that I'm good for nothing. She might even throw us out." Matthew felt the tears well up again, but he fought them back. He couldn't bear to see his father like this, angry and ashamed because of his mistake. "I didn't mean to, Daddy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I searched everywhere. I cried. I thought about not coming back home." His father's breath came out in a sharp exhale, his hands clenching into fists. But then, unexpectedly, Matthew added quietly, "But someone helped me." His father's eyes flickered with confusion. "Who helped you?" Matthew wiped his eyes, his voice steadier now as he spoke of the woman by the roadside. "Her name is Patricia. She sells tomatoes. She saw me crying and asked what was wrong. I told her everything, and she gave me 5,000 naira. Her last money." His father blinked, his expression shifting from confusion to a mixture of surprise and disbelief. "Wait," he said slowly. "She gave you money, just like that?" Matthew nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Yes, she said it was her last. But it didn't matter. She told me to be serious in school, not to follow bad friends. She said one day I would be great." For a moment, the room was silent. Then his father, his voice soft but filled with awe, whispered, "God bless that woman," as he sat down heavily on the bench. "A stranger helped my son when we had nothing left." Matthew felt a strange warmth in his chest as he watched his father's eyes soften. A quiet realization settling between them. "We have to thank her," his father said, the weight of gratitude in his voice. "This kind of kindness is rare." Matthew smiled through his tears. "Yes, Daddy, I want to thank her too. I promised her I wouldn't forget her. One day, I'll find her and help her. I won't forget her." His father placed a hand on Matthew's shoulder. "I believe you, son. God will help you." And in that moment, Matthew knew that his life had changed. Not just because of the school fees, but because of the kindness of one woman who believed in him when the world had turned its back. The next morning, as the sun rose higher in the sky, a sense of dread hung over Patricia. She had spent the night praying, hoping for a miracle, but her day began as it always did, slow, full of uncertainty, and weighed down by the struggle to survive. She sat behind her humble stall, surrounded by baskets of tomatoes, watching as the few customers who passed by barely spared her a glance. Her stomach growled, but there was nothing to eat. She barely had enough to keep the stall open, let alone buy herself a meal. But she didn't mind. She had made it this far. And as long as she could keep selling, she would keep fighting. Then, without warning, the peace was shattered. A loud, aggressive noise erupted in the distance. It was the sound of engines, the screech of tires, and the unmistakable sound of men shouting. Patricia's heart skipped a beat. She looked up, her eyes widening in confusion and fear, as a convoy of big trucks and men wearing government uniforms began to pull up. "All roadside stalls must be removed. This is government land. You were warned," one of the men bellowed through a megaphone. Before Patricia could even react, they descended on her stall like a storm. Her baskets of tomatoes were yanked off the table and sent tumbling to the ground, scattering in every direction. Her umbrella, old and weathered, was torn from its post and flung aside. The workers tore through her small stall with ruthless efficiency, shoving her aside as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. Patricia's hands trembled, and her voice caught in her throat as she begged them, "Please, wait, let me pack my goods." But no one listened, no one cared. They continued their destruction, and in mere moments, her livelihood was reduced to rubble. The wooden beams of her stall were splintered, the crates of tomatoes broken, and the little hope she had left was scattered in the dirt. Patricia stood frozen, helpless, holding one small basket of tomatoes that she had managed to save. Her hands shook as tears welled up in her eyes, mixing with the sweat on her face. "Where will I go now? What will I do?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Her heart ached as she looked at the mess around her. The other women in the market were crying too, begging for mercy, but it was too late. The trucks were already moving down the street, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. With no place to turn, Patricia clutched her basket close to her chest and walked home, her slippers kicking up dust as she moved slowly under the scorching sun. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. When she reached her house, she was met with yet another blow. Outside the gate, the landlord, a tall man with a cruel smile, stood with his arms crossed. "Patricia," he sneered, "I warned you. You haven't paid the rent for a whole year. I'm tired of your excuses." Patricia's heart sank. She could barely comprehend the words as they hit her like a punch to the gut. "Please, just a little more time," she begged, her voice desperate. "I lost everything today. I don't know where to go." But the landlord turned his back on her, his voice cold. "I have new tenants waiting. Get out, now." With that, he slammed the gate shut in her face, leaving Patricia standing there, defeated and broken. Her knees wobbled, and she collapsed onto the ground beside her bags, the weight of everything crashing down on her. She held her daughter's belongings close, but it felt like she was holding onto the remnants of her shattered life. For a long moment, no one said anything. People walked by, some glancing at her with pity, others pretending not to see. But no one stopped, no one helped. The sun was setting, and the street was growing quiet. But Patricia's heart felt colder than the evening air. "I'm sorry, Agatha," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I tried, I really tried." Her daughter, standing beside her, wiped away her tears and whispered back, "I know, Mama, you're the best mother in the world. God will help us." Patricia looked up at the sky, her heart heavy with sorrow but still clinging to the faintest glimmer of hope. "God," she whispered softly, "I don't regret helping that boy. If I had to choose again, I'd still give him my last. But I need a miracle now." And with that quiet prayer, she closed her eyes, hoping that somehow, somewhere, her faith would be enough to pull them through. The morning after everything had been destroyed, Patricia sat quietly in her small, dimly lit room, her thoughts as heavy as the silence around her. She had barely slept, the exhaustion from the previous day weighing on her body. But her mind was too restless to find peace. Agatha, her daughter, had woken up early, as always, but there was an unusual calm in her eyes. Despite the hardships, she had always been her mother's strength. And this morning, it seemed as if she had inherited that same unshakable faith. "Mom," Agatha said, her voice steady as she sat next to her, "we can't stay here. We have to keep moving forward. We'll go to Sister Na. Maybe she can help us." Patricia turned to her daughter, her heart aching with both pride and sorrow. Agatha had never been a child to complain, and in the midst of their suffering, she had remained a beacon of hope. Patricia's lips trembled as she nodded. She had heard of Sister Na, an old friend from her younger days, but it had been years since they had spoken. Patricia had nothing left to offer, no food, no savings, no strength. But Agatha's words had ignited something inside her, the faintest spark of belief that perhaps there was a way out of their endless cycle of misfortune. With only a few naira to their names, they gathered their few belongings and made their way to the bus station. Agatha held Patricia's hand tightly as they stepped onto the crowded bus. Their small bags pressed against their sides. The air inside was hot, and the ride seemed longer than it really was. But neither of them complained. As the bus rattled along, Patricia gazed out the window, silently praying for a sign, for anything that would show them they hadn't lost everything. When they finally arrived in the city, Patricia felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Sister Na had been one of the few people from her past who had ever shown her kindness. And now, in her darkest hour, she was turning to her. The streets were unfamiliar, and everything felt too far removed from the life they once had. But Agatha's quiet confidence kept her moving forward. They reached the gate of Sister Na's house, and Patricia knocked gently, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't just the fear of rejection that gripped her, it was the fear that even if she found help, it wouldn't be enough to change their fate. Moments later, the gate creaked open, and there stood Sister Na, her eyes widening in surprise. "Patricia?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. What's happened to you?" Tears welled up in Patricia's eyes as she explained their situation, her words tumbling out in a rush. She told Na about the stall, the eviction, and the sleepless nights. "We've lost everything," she whispered, the weight of it all crushing her spirit. Sister Na's face softened with compassion. "Come inside, Patricia. Come inside quickly." She ushered them through the gate, her movements hurried but gentle, as if she couldn't believe the sight of her friend's suffering. Once inside, Sister Na gave them water and comforted them with her warm presence. As they sat down, Patricia couldn't help but feel a twinge of disbelief. It wasn't just the kindness that was overwhelming, it was the sudden realization that someone was offering help when everything had seemed so hopeless. Then, just as Patricia was about to say something, Sister Na spoke again, her voice filled with a mix of amazement and joy. "Patricia, you are lucky. You've come at the right time. My husband and I are moving. I was about to give the house keys back to the landlord today to finish the paperwork. But now, it's yours. You and Agatha can stay here." Patricia blinked, stunned. "You're giving me your house?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, it's already paid for," Na said, her smile broadening. "You can stay here. It's yours now." The weight of the moment hit Patricia like a wave. Her body trembled with shock and relief. But there was no time for words. She collapsed into Na's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Thank you so much," she cried, her heart full of gratitude and disbelief. Na gently pulled back and placed her hands on Patricia's shoulders. "It's nothing, my sister," she said, her voice soft. "God must have sent you here at the right time. And I also have some money saved up. You can use it to start over. To rebuild your stall. Or for Agatha's schooling. It's yours." Patricia looked at her, unable to comprehend what was happening. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "How can I ever repay you?" Na smiled, her eyes kind. "You've helped me before, Patricia. This is just my turn to help you. God has a way of bringing us together when we need it most." For the first time in days, Patricia felt something shift inside her. The heavy burden that had weighed her down for so long lightened. And a sense of peace, one she hadn't felt in years, began to settle over her. "Thank you," she said again, tears still streaming down her face, but now with hope rather than sorrow. Agatha, watching her mother, whispered softly, "See, Mama, our story is changing." And in that moment, Patricia finally allowed herself to believe it. Matthew and his father arrived at the place where Patricia had once sold her tomatoes, their hearts full of anticipation. But as they reached the familiar street, a wave of disappointment crashed over them. The once bustling market was now eerily silent. The stalls and umbrellas that had dotted the roadside completely gone. The space that had once held so much life, Patricia's humble stall. The colorful baskets of produce, the friendly chatter of customers, was now nothing more than an empty plot of land. Broken wooden beams and scattered debris were all that remained, remnants of the life that had been so abruptly torn away. Matthew's heart sank as he stood there, helpless, scanning the area for any sign of the woman who had once helped him so selflessly. "Daddy," Matthew said softly, his voice heavy with emotion. "This is where she sat. This was her stall." His father looked around, his eyes searching the desolate space. But there was no sign of Patricia. No trace of the woman who had changed their lives. The realization hit them both at the same time. This wasn't just a loss of a stall, it was a loss of something far more significant. She was gone, and with her, the hope that had once seemed so certain. "I don't understand," Matthew's father murmured, his voice laced with frustration. "Where did she go? What happened?" "I don't know, Daddy," Matthew replied, his throat tight with disappointment. "I thought we would find her here." His gaze wandered over the barren land, his hope beginning to fade. He had promised Patricia that he wouldn't forget her, that he would find her and help her in return for the kindness she had shown him. But now, in the face of this emptiness, those words seemed hollow. His father placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice softening. "It's all right, son, we'll keep looking. If she helped you once, she won't be forgotten. We'll find her, we have to believe that." But Matthew's spirit was crushed. He had hoped that somehow they would come across Patricia, that they would be able to thank her, to show her how much her kindness had meant. Instead, They were left with only the cold remnants of what once was. They turned away from the empty street, walking back to the bus stop, their steps heavy with defeat. Matthew kept his eyes on the ground, his mind racing with unanswered questions. Where had she gone? What had happened to her? He couldn't understand how someone who had shown such generosity could simply vanish without a trace. As they boarded the bus to return home, Matthew glanced out the window, the fading sunlight casting a shadow over his thoughts. He promised himself, though, that no matter how long it took, he would find Patricia. He wouldn't let her kindness be forgotten. Days passed, and while Matthew and his father searched for Patricia, life took a surprising turn for her. After her stall was destroyed and she faced eviction, Patricia's old friend, Sister Na, reached out, offering her a lifeline. Na, who had moved to a new house, welcomed Patricia and Agatha with open arms. Not only did she offer them shelter, but she also gave them money to help restart their lives. Patricia was overwhelmed with gratitude. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The weight of her struggles lifted, if only slightly, as she realized that kindness, even in the darkest of times, could still find its way back to her. Agatha smiled for the first time in days, seeing her mother's burden eased. Patricia whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, knowing that this was a turning point, one she could never have imagined when everything seemed lost. Matthew's life transformed after his father won the lottery, a staggering 100 million naira. The weight of years of struggle was lifted in an instant. They moved into a beautiful house, and Matthew threw himself into his studies and work. He promised to make something of himself, never forgetting Patricia, the woman who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness. Determined to keep his word, Matthew built a successful business, known for its integrity and his humble spirit. Yet, no matter how much wealth he acquired, he never stopped searching for the woman who had given him everything when he had nothing. Years later, Matthew's search for Patricia never wavered. One day, fate brought them together in an unexpected twist. As he visited Agatha's house, he was struck with recognition. The woman he had been searching for was sitting in front of him. Patricia, the kind stranger who had once given him her last money, was now Agatha's mother. Shock and disbelief washed over him, but all he could do was kneel before her, overcome with gratitude. "You changed my life," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. With tears in her eyes, Patricia realized that the boy she had helped all those years ago had kept his promise. Matthew's heart swelled with gratitude as he fulfilled his promise to Patricia. He had risen from humble beginnings, and now, with the wealth he had earned, he returned to her with a gift of love and appreciation. He gave her a fully furnished house, a place she would never have to worry about losing. Along with it, he handed her a check for 10 million naira, money for all the hardships she had endured. Patricia, overwhelmed with emotion, could hardly believe what was happening. In that moment, she knew that the kindness she had once shown had come full circle, and her faith had been rewarded in the most miraculous way. This story teaches us the profound impact of kindness and selflessness. Even when we have little, a simple act of generosity can change someone's life forever. Matthew's success was not only due to his hard work but also because of the compassion of a stranger who believed in him when no one else did. It reminds us that what we give with a pure heart always comes back, sometimes in ways we never expect. If you were moved by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Your support helps us share more heartwarming stories like this one. Thank you.